here with Omar Morales, who is the creator, writer of a young adult graphic novel, volume one, because as I said, it kind of ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. So we'll call it, Major Thomás. So first off, let's just tell people watching who haven't read it what is Major Thomás. What's your pitch for this?
Yeah, it's about a young man who grows up in the Central Valley of California, dreaming of being an astronaut. And the cards are stacked against him. He's a Mexican American farm worker, living in a very kind of impoverished community. But against all the odds, he finds a way to get into NASA and is tasked with becoming the first hyperspace traveler in the history of humanity. And just as everything starts to take off for him, literally, he ends up lost in space, separated from the woman he loves, who's like the co-main character. Her name is Lisa. And he has to find a way back to Earth. But along the way, he encounters aliens and robots and all manner of action and adventure. So it's a classic kind of hero's journey type of story. It's very accessible. As you mentioned, it's young adults. So teenagers, young kids can read it. Adults can enjoy it just as well. If you like action adventure and pulpy type of comics, if you're a fan of Star Wars or Lost in Space, I call it La Bamba meets Lost in Space meets Guardians of the Galaxy, because it's kind of has a fun, light vibe, and there's no swearing, there's no sexual situations. It's pretty clean, and it's a nice little read. It's about 45 minute read. It's exclusively on Comixology Originals right now, digitally. It's only $6.99 for 125 pages of content, and it'll be coming out in print in January. I can't give all the details yet about who, what, when, where, why, but people who are interested in it, I would encourage them to read it digitally. It's cheap to purchase, and then if they like it, they can go buy it in print come January.
I mean, yes, I know the Central Valley. I know it very well. What inspired you to write this?
So there was many inspirations, but I would say the main two are a real life astronaut named Jose M. Hernandez. He actually wrote the foreword for the book. I don't know if you noticed that, but
I did.
Right before the story starts, he writes a little blurb about his experiences growing up in the Central Valley and becoming an astronaut. And he was a big inspiration. He's a real life guy, and he really stole my heart because when they showed a video of him in the space capsule and they were beaming it back to Earth, he was waving his Oakland Raiders flag. And, I'm a huge Raiders fan. And so I was like, oh my God, this guy's my all-time hero. Like, who is this guy? I got to find out more about him. And he's actually very active here in the local Central Valley community. I believe he owns a winery in Lodi. He has a nonprofit in Stockton that he has started to help kids who want to explore space and science and technology. And a cousin of mine actually does some charitable work with him. So it's interesting because he was actually born in the same hometown as my dad. So it was just kind of like meant to be that we were going to cross paths, in the cosmos one day, and it all came together. I would say the other inspiration that came along before I knew about Jose is just the rock songs about the astronaut who's lost in space, Major Tom, right? David Bowie did it first, and then the great Peter Schilling had a huge hit in the early 80s about Major Tom. And I went to a rock concert and I saw a band called Shiny Toy Guns do a cover of Peter Schilling's Major Tom, and they just blew the roof off of the venue in San Francisco. And I was just so inspired by the emotion of the lead singer singing about this astronaut who's lost in space that I just, something inside me just sparked and said, I want to write a story about this guy, Major Tom. Who is he? How did he get into space? Why do we care that he's lost? Who are these people he's trying to get back to on Earth? And I just imagined him a little bit differently as a brown person, growing up here in California, and so my mind just took off from there. So those are the two main inspirations, and of course, growing up as a Star Wars fan and a Nintendo fan, and of course things like Lost in Space and La Bamba too. I mean, it's all kind of a mishmash of things that in this hero's journey that's a classic action adventure. You know, as I like to say, Major Thomás takes place in the near future, but it could have taken place in 1950, or it can take place in the year 2050. Like the story's pretty timeless in terms of the themes and the tropes.
Yeah, when did you actually write it? Because I think, like, right now, what's interesting to me, and I try not to get political in these conversations, but you know, we're in a period where it's definitely not as was in a recent comic called Death to Pachuco. It's not a good time to be a Mexican, and you know, that's a line that repeats in that. It seems to me that the space program seems oddly separate from all that. You know, like, you know, I barely even knew we were launching a mission, 3 or 4 months ago, and suddenly, wow, that's cool. It's still happening. So, you know, what do you know, when you started this, you know, I think it now feels even more importantly aspirational.
Yeah. And part of my journey with this is to inspire young people to go after their dreams, because I'm sure there's a movie about Jose's life where the woman he wants to marry, he tells her, I want to be an astronaut. She starts laughing. She starts laughing hysterically. And she's like, oh, you're serious. And, you know, you could tell it hurt his feelings in the movie, in the dramatization. And I really want to inspire young people to say, hey, whatever your dream is, whether it's being an astronaut or being a firefighter, a lawyer, a doctor, the president of the United States, go for it. Because there's examples of people who have done it. You know, in the first page of my book, I list out several people that have had success in NASA as Hispanics, you know, from all over the world, that have made it into NASA and made an impact as brown people, helping, you know, the U.S. Explore space and further the aim of humanity. And that it's not some bogus comic booky thing where I'm making up Latino heroes that have traveled to space. No, they exist. There's several of them. And there's also others like Diana Trujillo. I believe she's from Colombia, and she immigrated to the U.S., went to the University of Florida, and put herself through college cleaning houses. So she was like, you know, a housemaid, and she made it, and she became like a flight director at NASA. And so I really wanted people to understand that, you know, minorities in NASA is not just some made up thing. They've been contributing from the beginning.
Yeah, you know? No, you know, obviously, and that's another reason why I think this is a really important graphic novel.
Thank you.
You've rooted it in place. You know, I think I told you, messaging back and forth, like, you know, I know Salinas fairly well because I used to live in Gilroy, and I know the northern Central Valley, if you will, of, like, you know, Stockton and Lodi, because I was born in Manteca. So, you know, all of that feels real, down to that you use Notre Dame High School in Salinas, because I used to teach at the sister school. So, you know, it felt so rooted and so grounded before you got to the sci-fi.
Right.
You know, so how much is autobiographical?
I mean, I did take some liberties, right? For example, Notre Dame High School in Salinas is an all-girls school, but in the future, I made it into a co-ed school.
Sure. I mean, I didn't want to say anything. That was the only thing you got wrong to me.
No, it was intentional. I was like, you know, I wanted to show Thomás as a young teenager and how he was falling in love with Lisa. And I couldn't do that if they were at separate schools, right? So I had to embellish a little bit. But yes, you know, Derek, my approach is I don't spend a lot of time world building. I much rather use the Marvel method, where we put our heroes in actual New York, in the actual 5 boroughs. I didn't want to make up a city like, you know, Metropolis or Gotham, you know, no knock on DC, but I always prefer that style of storytelling where the heavy lifting is already done by what's real. And to your point, it felt grounded and it felt real to you because you're from, you know, the Central Valley. And so, and then same thing with the space scenes. When we go into the science fiction element, I wasn't making things up. I used real galaxies. I used real constellations. I used a black hole called the Giant Annihilator, which is a real black hole that exists in the near the Ophiuchus constellation.
Well, that's reassuring that something out there is called the Giant Annihilator. But yeah, okay, go ahead.
And then the main planet where all the action takes place, that it's stuck in tidal lock, so it doesn't spin. and half of it's frozen cold because it's in the darkness, and the other half is burning hot because it's always facing the sun in that system. It's a real place called Wolf 10163 and or 16016. I read the book, but
look it up, kids. Look it up. Okay.
Yeah, and it's a real place that exists, and it's stuck in tidal lock, and it has these little strips of Goldilocks zone of twilight right in between the hot and the cold where life could exist. Mm-hmm. And so all these things are real. These are all research things. And so I was like, I don't want to be making stuff up in my quote world building. I'd rather just use what's available. And I hope the scientific community appreciates that, as well as the farming in the Central Valley, labor community up and down California.
I think YA is always a weird category for me, because especially in graphic novels, because it's like, yeah, I'd give this to my kid. Like, I mean, I think people think like Bone is YA, and I go, there's nothing problem with that. Let my kids read that when they were 7 or 8, so, why that audience rather than say, let's just do this hard hitting, is it just that inspirational?
Yeah, I mean, my all-time favorite franchise is Star Wars, and when I think about Star Wars, to me it feels very YA. It's rated PG. I think Revenge of the Sith might have been PG-13 because it went a little bit more hardcore.
Yeah, but that was 21st century. Yeah.
So I wanted something that was very accessible. I wanted something that families could read together, in the same way that I enjoyed Star Wars or Marvel Comics with my dad growing up. And, one of the things that I do appreciate, though, about Marvel and George Lucas is they made it accessible, but yet they didn't dumb it down, right? They didn't talk down to kids, right? Like, mm-hmm. I remember learning so many words reading Marvel Comics because I had to have a dictionary nearby as I was reading the comic to go, what does opaque mean? Oh, that's what that means,
Well, as I said, when I met Len Wein, I said, the worst impact he had on my language was I thought that everybody in New York called everybody else boy chick, because every character in a Len Wein Marvel story would say, hey, hey, boy chick. And I was like, I did not know that was like, an East Coast Jewish thing. Yeah. So, yes, we got impacted by that vocabulary. And I'm with you on that as well. I still hear people looking down at comics sometimes as reading. And I say, like, I'm as, well, maybe not as articulate as I used to be, but as articulate as I am because of comics and Doc Savage, because you get exposed to these big words, and you're right.
Yeah.
And kids, this is before dictionary.com. We're talking real dictionaries you had to look up, so.
Positively. Right. And to be frank with you, part of my origin story is I learned English through comic books. I only spoke Spanish when I went to kindergarten, and I was going to fail miserably, but the teacher there in kindergarten, the nun, Ms. Munoz, spoke to my parents and said, hey, you got to go full on English 100% from here on in. So what is he like? What is he interested in? They were like, well, he seems to like comics and science fiction and things. So she said, okay, inundate him with that. So they shoved all the comics and coloring books and toys and after school cartoons in English that they could. And that's how I absorbed English. So I probably knew what thwip, means before I knew what, some other word meant, so, but it worked. And I got through school with flying colors and good grades and went to college and studied journalism. And so, English has been a good friend to me. And now I got to go back and recapture my Spanish. I'm probably about 75% of where I want to be.
Is there a Spanish translation version of Major Thomás?
No, there is not. However, part of the contract that I have with Amazon through the Comixology Originals program is that they have the rights to take it to foreign markets for translation.
Okay, good.
So I'm hoping that it catches on well enough and sells well enough where that is justified. And as well as with the print version that's coming out in January, right? Because that company also has some ties to other comics publishers in Europe and such. So hopefully, with any luck, there will be a Spanish language translation because that would be phenomenal. That would help me reach even more Latinos. And by the way, this book was created 100% by Latino and Latina creators from all over the world. The artists, Serge and Mao, and then we had the colorists, Raul and Fabi, and then we have the letterer, Taylor Esposito, and then Gab Contreras did a lot of the graphic design. The front cover was done by Renee Delis.
Here it is. Hey, sorry, I'm looking for. I had the postcard you gave me at WonderCon. It's been, and I'm sorry, I folded it. But
all good.
They're and quotes from people I very much respect as well. And you got a quote from Alex Segura, who I think is dynamite. Though I don't know if he's ever worked for Dynamite, but anyway, yeah. So I mean, that is cool. So I'm so thrilled to hear that it's going to get a print version in January. We can wait. And will I see you at Comic-Con this summer?
Yes, I will be at Comic-Con. I have several panels lined up, but I know how Comic-Con frowns on announcing anything.
No, I know. Yeah. I'm on panels too, and I can't say anything more than at this point. Absolutely, but that's good. So we'll cross paths at Comic-Con. Yeah. Thank you, Omar. And I realize we're not that far away from Comic-Con, so it's not gonna be that long. But it's great to talk to you, and I'm glad you reached back out because my brain is a sieve right now. So it's like good pressure. That I can't wait to see what happens next.